After much anticipation, SpaceX has finally rolled out a brand new Super Heavy booster for pre-launch testing, putting them back on track after Booster 18's accident back in November. Regulatory approvals have also been cleared for Starship's launch facility at Launch Complex 39A, and we now have the first filings for SpaceX's proposal to deploy up to 1 million satellites in orbit, all while assembly continues on further Starship vehicles at the production site, in addition to SpaceX moving at full speed regarding the air separation unit to streamline further launch pad operations. From Starbase Texas to the Space Coast of Florida, the Starship program is relentlessly charging into 2026. All of this and much more coming up on this week's Starship Update, sponsored by Surfshark. We'll start this week off with Booster 19's rollout to Massey's for pre-launch testing. The story here actually begins with the booster transport stand. We've been so anxious for Booster 19's rollout that when SpaceX moved it into the ring yard, we all kind of leaned forward in our seats a little bit. It didn't quite seem right though. Booster 19 still needs the thrust simulator stand, and not that for regular transport. But a rollout closure then appeared on Starbase's website, listing a production site to launch site transport route, which fueled speculations that Booster 19 might be on the move. And spoiler alert, the stand rolled out to Pad 2 completely empty. SpaceX got us pretty good. But why move an empty stand? Well, teams have to evaluate placing it under the chopsticks as if it was loaded with a booster connected to pad systems. This verifies communication and fitment in the area. We also got to see the hold-down arms sliding in and out multiple times. We hope for a full simulation, chopsticks moving, SQD retracting, but they focus on the stand itself. The full test should come later. However, while SpaceX kind of punked us into thinking Booster 19 might be rolling to the pad, they did end up rolling it out of Gigabay 1 and transporting it over to Massey's for proof testing. As expected, it was sitting on the thrust simulator stand so they can, well, simulate the forces of 33 Raptor engines against the booster's aft section while undergoing cryogenic testing. With this, we're back to where we were with Booster 18 before it, well, unzipped back in November. Its failure occurred about 1 day after rollout during a gas system pressure test. To this point, Booster 19 appears to have progressed through testing here without unzipping, thankfully, and SpaceX has also begun to load cryogenic fluid, which is a very welcome positive step forward here. On later previous-gen boosters, campaigns were swift with just a couple of cryo tests. But with version 3 being so new, we should expect a bit more than that. That said, they could potentially condense the testing timeline, maybe wrapping up in a week or so like before. If so, Booster 19 could return to Gigabay 1 soon, and then on to Pad 2 for engine testing. Eventually, the pre-launch campaign timeline will be trimmed to minimal requirements, just like Falcon 9 boosters, which now receive just one cryo test and one static fire before their debut. But for Super Heavy, there's still a ton of data left to gather and lessons to learn, especially on version 3. Up next, we'll be checking on the status of other Starship vehicles at Starbase, but first, a word from today's sponsor.
Playing with fire is dangerous. I don't know why they trust me with this thing. Almost as dangerous as the real Raptor engines, but definitely not as dangerous as browsing the web without a VPN. That's right, we're jumping the shark, and this video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Soviets may have stolen plans to build their own space shuttle, but your plans are safe when using Surfshark. With industry-leading security, you can feel safe sharing files, whether it's photos from KSC like I do, or personal documents that are needed to get media access, or I guess normal things too, like banking. Plus, if I'm out at a launch and I want lunch, I want to be able to edit photos of launches while eating lunches. And I know I can feel safe doing that when connected to public Wi-Fi, which can be notoriously sketchy when I have Surfshark turned on. And now Surfshark can better protect you from threats with their new email scan checker. Not sure if it's actually Elon Musk asking you to invest in SpaceX? Feel confident that your emails are from real people and companies with a simple click. So don't get burned online. Go to surfshark.com/spaceflight or enter code SPACEFLIGHT at checkout and get 4 extra months. And unlike flying on Starship, there is no risk trying it as there is a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video.
Aside from Booster 19, we were also very eager to see progress on Ship 39, the very ship assigned to fly with Booster 19 for Flight 12. Unfortunately, there hasn't been much change since our last update, as we're still waiting on Ship 39.1 to finish testing at Massey's. But just like with Booster 19, we'll be sure to keep a close eye on the City of Starbase's website for potential road closures that could indicate when this may occur. While Ship 39 may not have seen much change this week, the next in line is poised for major progress soon, that being Ship 40. This week, SpaceX rolled Ship 40's PEZ dispenser into Mega Bay 2, a key step before stacking. Then, the pre-stacked nose cone and payload bay, visible through Star Factory windows, followed by the PEZ installation. Ahead of rollout, forward flap straps were removed. Our field team actually spotted an employee boroscoping a thruster embedded into the nose cone's heat shield tiles. Pretty unique. With the nose cone and payload bay sections now in Mega Bay 2, SpaceX will lift it over the PEZ dispenser and secure it, followed by adding the remaining barrel sections that make up the rest of the ship. If previous timelines are to be believed from Ship 39, it may be a little over a month before we see a completely stacked vehicle. But there's always the possibility of timelines being condensed, so we may see it stacked by the end of February. Now, as for the rest of the ships, their full stack timeline depends on progress inside of Star Factory. Through the glass windows, we spotted work on Ship 41's nose cone tiles this week. It had a missing row near the tip for a while, but now it's being filled in, which is good news for our OCD folks. By the way, actually, we discussed potential tile testing on a recent Vandenberg Starlink launch last episode, and it actually happened again after that. Go ahead and check out that episode for our deep dive on what might be going on there. Now back to Star Factory. Ship 45's untiled nose cone has been, well, spinning this week, quite literally, in the new robotic station installed a few weeks back, where we've been seeing all these fancy new robots being tested. We're unsure what SpaceX is up to with it, but it's intriguing nonetheless. Almost like Ship 45 is buffering or something. Out at Massey's, we're keeping an eye on the area as it's hosting 3 separate test tanks qualifying Starship V3 design, and vehicles like Booster 19 for pre-launch testing. At the static fire testing area, even more hardware has been added to the truss structure. We're still unsure of its exact purpose, but the new sections seem to aim at the ship-facing sides. SpaceX also delivered a new methane tank to the tank farm at the static fire site, boosting methane capacity as part of their upgrades since Ship 36's demise back in June. This week saw more S39.1 testing at the cryo area. It's unclear how much still remains, but we'll of course be tracking it. Teams have also removed hardware from B18.1 and B18.3. B18.3 actually ruptured during testing nearly a week ago now. Afterward, they pulled the load cap and simulated ship's skirt used in said testing. For B18.1, the blue straps securing the load cap were then removed, likely signaling an imminent cap removal. Remember the booster transport stand rollout earlier? The same closure moved a ring cart from the production site over to Massey's, ideal for holding B18.1 once it's off the structural stand. The roadwork around Massey Way wrapped up ahead of B19's rollout this week, enabling vehicle traffic. We may see B18.3 and .1 departing soon when they're ready. There is still another booster test tank to account for though, but it just so happens to be the one at SpaceX's McGregor facility in Central Texas, which means it's time for our McGregor Minute. This test tank simulates a section of the booster fuel transfer tube running through the liquid oxygen tank. It's the third of its type at McGregor, in the same spot as previous articles. In recent days, teams covered it in a white shell that we have also seen before, often a sign that testing is imminent. We believe the shell simulates the LOX tank environment, better recreating real-world conditions for the tube during tests. Well, that's it for the test tanks, thankfully. But at McGregor, Raptor testing continues. Tests have been sparse in the last couple of weeks since our last check-in, unfortunately, mostly taking place from Raptor South, with only a few from North. The vertical stand remains offline after that accident on that Keralox Raptor a few weeks ago. A lull washed over the site from the 24th to the 27th, possibly due to cold weather, with no test taking place at all during that time. At least we spotted a few Raptor 3 engines rolling by our cameras. That was a nice little treat. All of the hardware we've covered so far will all eventually need to converge somewhere gargantuan for future vehicle assembly. And of course, I'm talking about SpaceX's Gigabay facilities. In the Texas versus Florida construction battle, Florida's Gigabay leads with added progress on its 3rd and 4th levels this week. In Starbase, the 3rd level is nearing completion with more beams and columns installed on the front and rear of the complex. Near Florida's Gigabay, SpaceX is assembling a new crawler crane, likely for installing wall and roof panels. Right now, it's about 1 level short of its final height on the western side, but at the pace teams have been keeping, that could finish up real soon, which would explain the crane. Starbase's Gigabay lags about a month behind Florida's, but we expect similar crane moves there soon, given the progress. This week also brought more news on the Space Coast with newly approved regulatory paperwork. The FAA has released its final Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, and a Record of Decision, or ROD, for Starship's launch pad at Launch Complex 39A. The agency worked on this for about 2 years, so it's refreshing to see all of this finally coming together. SpaceX had held NASA's environmental approval since 2019 to build at LC-39A. But for an FAA launch license, SpaceX's proposed changes prompted further review. A draft EIS dropped in August, followed by a public comment period for external feedback. The final EIS incorporates that input with no major changes from the draft. The key here, though, is that the ROD confirms the FAA's selection of SpaceX's environmental proposal. It notes no blanket approval, though, requiring coordination and numerous agencies during construction and launch operations. Now, while this does not grant launch approval, that requires a license, it does clear this long-awaited paperwork hurdle. The documents outline mitigations to minimize local environmental impacts amid Florida's bustling spaceflight scene. And yeah, it's like Missile Row 2.0 right now. But migrating back to Starbase, there's plenty of work at the launch site for both Pad 1 and Pad 2. At Pad 1, teams are advancing foundation piles for the brand new launch mount and flame trench design next to the tower. These foundations require dozens of piles, so it might take a few more weeks before digging the actual trench commences. We'll watch for sheet piles marking the dig perimeter as a key indicator of what's to come. Meanwhile, more concrete and groundbreaking to the south is likely making room for the larger footprint of the new launch mount and trench. Tower 1 refurbishment and repairs are also continuing. Tower 1's chopsticks had their stabilizer arms removed this week, likely to make room for the newer design that we've seen on Pad 2. Now, as part of modifying Pad 1's design with Pad 2's, a southern launch site expansion is coming soon. For that, SpaceX staged rolls of geotextile fabric at the launch site to be laid on the ground. Work has not started yet, but with the hardware ready, that may change in the very near future, possibly by our next episode. This newly expanded area will add room for a new transport road linking the west and east ends of the complex without cutting through the middle, plus extra tank farm storage, an upgraded deluge system for Pad 1, and a natural gas purification facility. Teams are also continuing to work and test Pad 2 systems before supporting its maiden launch campaign for Flight 12. Apart from the booster transporter test that we've already covered, we've seen extensive water deluge system testing taking place. Teams tested the FireX system on the launch mount as well, distinct from the detonation suppressant system, or DSS, which is activated just before an engine test or launch, despite some visual similarities. Recent days also brought 4 tubes added to the mount's outer bottom perimeter. On the sides facing inward, we can see that they have a system of lenses and lights, likely engineering cameras for supporting angles of the engine section while the rocket is at the pad. The new launch mount design lacks the old mount's legs, perhaps complicating protected camera placement. Though considering the lessons learned from Pad 1 and through 11 launches now, I think it's safe to assume that we're still going to eventually see some absolutely epic angles in action here. Across the road from the launch site, SpaceX continues advancing construction of their new Air Separation Unit, or ASU. More large hardware components have arrived and are being installed with their on-site cranes. Included in the variety of components delivered are those for the distillation tower and the heat exchangers being used there. Such units will alleviate the number of required truck deliveries for tank farm refills. Once the southern expansion is complete with a natural gas purification plant, pipeline installation will further reduce tank deliveries as well. These steps will aid in operations required for rapid Starship launch cadence without worrying about commodities. SpaceX proposes similar ASU and gas plants at each site, both in Starbase and in Florida. Now onto a very hot topic of conversation. We've seen in recent episodes how Elon has grown very eager to ramp up Starship production and launch cadence. We assume this wasn't just for Mars ambitions, but tied to emerging AI data centers in space. Well, there's no longer any need for assumption. Paperwork has confirmed that SpaceX has massive plans for massive Starship launch operations for precisely that reason. This week, the company filed an FCC permit proposing a mega constellation of orbital data centers, 1 million of them to be exact. And yeah, you heard that right. 1 million, which would dwarf even the current Starlink constellation. The narrative states, launching a constellation of 1 million satellites that operate as orbital data centers is a first step towards becoming a Kardashev 2-level civilization. Once that can harness the sun's full power, while supporting AI-driven applications for billions of people today, and ensuring humanity's multi-planetary future amongst the stars. These data centers would be separate from Starlink, but they would be used also for ground communication. They'd have their own antennas for tracking and telemetry, hence the FCC permit. Now, this is where Starship comes in. All satellites will be launched by Starship, leveraging its tonnage and reusability for cost-effective deployment. Vaguely assuming 100 satellites per launch, that's at least 10,000 Starship flights just for the constellation alone. Add replenishments every 5 or so years, kind of like Starlink's lifespan for example, plus hundreds for Gen 3 Starlinks and Gen 2 of Starlink Direct to Cell. And that's just satellites, mind you. Factor in SpaceX's Mars ambitions, NASA's Artemis program, and other missions for additional clientele as well, like the US government. Defense is a big industry in space. Now, putting this all together, Elon's massive production statements make total sense. It quite obviously will not be happening overnight, but it's safe to say that the next 5 to 10 years are going to be a wild ride for the spaceflight sector. As if the last 5 or 10 years weren't already wild enough. Notably, the proposal interestingly includes sun-synchronous orbital targets, which are reachable from Florida via the Southern Polar Launch Corridor. But the dogleg could cut payload capacity, reducing the number of satellites per launch. But for all we know, this might spur SpaceX on to seek easier sun-synchronous orbit sites like Vandenberg or Kodiak, or even revive the old ocean oil rigs concept. In any case, we're not going to have any shortage of topics to cover here in the near future by the way things are currently stacking up. And we are incredibly excited about it. And we hope you are too. Now, what do you guys think of all this? Will Booster 19 suffer the same fate as its predecessor? Do you think this large concept of Starship launch operations for the in-orbit mega constellation is even viable? Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Remember to visit surfshark.com/spaceflight or enter code SPACEFLIGHT at checkout to get 4 extra months for free. I'm Max Evans for NSF. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.